Hiya, it's Io. A lot of discussion has been done around Mythic Plus in this season already, and so I'll try to keep this as brief as I can. But I'll probably fail at that, like all my other keys. Essentially, I just want to get across my thoughts on Mythic Plus this season. I usually get around 2700, where you get portals in every dungeon, and then I stop caring for Mythic Plus, and maybe fill out some vaults after that. That has always been the case and not a new thing, even in Legion. Mythic Plus is something I do for fun with friends, guildmates, and for Vault. And that's it. I see no point pushing for titles, and there is nothing in between for me to care about. I rarely ever pug, so I won't be speaking for the pug experience this season, mainly because it's always bad. If my guild is anything to go by, I know it's probably much, much worse than it usually is. And I've seen videos and such that would indicate that. Unless, of course, they lower boss's health to 1, but I'm sure pugs would still find a way to fuck that up. But if there was ever a time I do care about Mythic Plus, it is whether or not I am miserable while doing it. And then, slightly above that, whether or not my guildmates are miserable as well. And for the season, my guild is miserable, so it does make me care about it in its current state. Unfortunately, this season, there isn't really one thing I can point to as the issue, as many impactful changes were made all at once. It's not prideful or beguiling or storming where I can be like, oh yeah, that's the reason, that right there, officer. The bad times are hiding within the confines of the Temple of the Jade Serpent. The idea of Kiss Curse affixes is a nice one and suggested often enough, as it was a mainstay of seasonal affixes for a while. And if I was going to keep affixes at all for Mythic Plus, seasonal ones was the ones I would have kept, and I personally felt that it was the wrong decision to remove them in Dragonflight. So it was nice to see that they were back in some form. But it's hard to make these kinds of affixes without it being an annoyance in some fashion, while having the buffs feel different from each other, while also still being impactful and overcovering the hindrance of the affix itself, or making the dungeon too easy. And the only way these affixes work if the dungeons are tailored for them. As such, these affixes ultimately have the same issue as the old ones do, just delivered by floating feet. Affixes are a minor inconvenience until they align with some boss or trash ability that then proceeds to do a 3-pointer with your key and the trash bin across the room. And there you are, just stuck on that ball of paper, flying through the air, wondering how you got there. And then there's Challenger's Peril, which is purely a downside until they banded a slight buff to it. And unlike Tyrannical or Fortifying, that you could argue they at least have some value in changing what you do every week, Challenger's Peril is a randomly placed peer downside that heavily punishes mistakes, even when there are plenty of things in dungeon design that already do this, and probably better, but they're still kind of annoying, like respawn points and runbacks and boss resetting and such, or in extreme cases of necrotic wake and weapons. So I don't know why they felt they needed this, but it seems universally hated enough that I doubt it's staying. The only question there is whether death penalties are still needed. I don't think they do. But this affix feels especially bad to all sorts of bull hockey. From the high, spiky damage of mobs, endless casting of abilities on both bosses and trash, and dots that tick for a third of people's health, high damage AoE abilities, and more. But that's really just the start of what makes Challenger's Peril feel bad, since I haven't started talking about the bugs and terrible readability of abilities. There are, and have been, dozens of rather frustrating bugs this season. From hero talents pulling random mobs, enchants pulling random mobs, items pulling mobs, invisible swirlies and cones, cones that hit farther than the visual, swirlies that clip and hide in the environment, not being able to mount during a boss, affixes spawning at the worst times, pets despawning or dying to abilities they shouldn't, and of course, an entire dungeon being unplayable for players randomly. Then of course, you have other problems with better gear, needing higher and more difficult keys than previous seasons, tanks being a little bit weaker, heals still being rather weak, and then you mix all that up for a nice souffle of crap. The general experience my guild and guilds and groups that I know of are that no one is having fun with Mythic Plus. and that they are only doing it for vaults. Even groups that do, or rather did, enjoy Mythic Plus are stopping early this season. The quest change and the tuning changes are far too light to fix any of these problems, and at risk at saying something really controversial, the quests were the least of the season's problems. It's nice seeing it fixed, of course. Having it scale the difficulty of the key is, of course, logical, but things needed changed a few weeks ago. If next season is as hard and changes happen as slowly as this one, then Mythic Plus will see very little participation. And so I've come to my main point here. Blizzard needs to be more proactive with dungeons, which is the main thing I want to get across with all this. I understand there are leaderboards and all that, but the experience for the majority of players need to be prioritized over trying to prevent some arbitrary level of keys being done. Anyways, thank you for watching. Goodbye.